Good evening, and welcome to the Mowing After Dark show here on the College Football Mafia Network. I want to thank everybody for tuning in here. Good to see everybody. Good to see Rock and Rant back in the house. It's been a couple weeks. How you feeling, Rock?
I'm doing good, despite what Mike Haynes decided to do to me yesterday. But shout out Virginia Cavaliers, the best team in the ACC, which we'll get into.
As long as Pitt loses, I'm for it. We're going to talk about all the top 10 matchups yesterday, the chaos that ensued, all these things better left unsaid, but it was a very interesting weekend in college football. There were blowouts, there were upsets, there were calls that some found controversial. Um, Kansas went out there and absolutely worked over Iowa State. I don't think anybody saw that.
Unreal.
Uh,
I guess Kansas got a delayed message that the season started after
yeah.
everybody hyping them up over the summer.
Iowa State's defense had been so strong throughout the season, and they just, boy, I think it was 31-14 at the half. I mean, Virginia just, or Kansas just absolutely dropped them.
Ugly.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and say hi to some people here. Let me pull the mic away so I'm not so hot on there. Ryan Willie says, hi, College Football Mafia family. Good to see
What's
you,
up,
Ryan.
Ryan?
$5 super chat from Ryan. I wonder how Wild Ute is doing after Utah claims the game was stolen. The ACC and Big 12 don't deserve two teams in the college football playoff. I'll watch it later tonight. Well, Ute was obviously upset, and I am going to take the point that he had every right to be. We'll talk about that. I don't want to talk about that right now, but I don't disagree with the call, but at the time the call was made. So we'll talk about it, Ryan. But definitely you're going to want to tune in tomorrow night or Tuesday night, excuse me. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on the Big 12 Mafia show. You and Bomber will be there. Bomber just did a show earlier. I don't know if you were able to catch that. It was about 10 minutes before we went live. He wrapped up covering the Holy War. So very interesting stuff. Thank you for the super chat, Ryan. I will give you a, let's see. I can't find my evil badger laugh, Ryan. It's been a while since I pushed it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Evil badger. Badgers still got to get bowl eligible, I think, right? I think they've only got 5 wins. And I know it does not get easier for y'all. You got to play Oregon, but you do get them in Camp Randall at night. That could be a trap game for the Oregon Ducks. Nathan Campbell says, hi, guys. Good to see you, Nathan. Jeff Fuller's here, says, go Cougs, 9-0, and finding a way to win when it looked bleak. Timothy Green says, what's up, college football fans? Let's go Mountaineers. Yeah.
Good game.
They broke the heart of some kids in Cincinnati yesterday. Antoine Codes says, hey, y'all. Good to see you, Antoine Codes. Nate's still here. He wants to ask, what the hell with Miami? So before we finish saying hello to people, let's go ahead and you can say your piece, you can rant, you can give a post-mortem, whatever.
Yeah, I don't even really have a rant. Like I posted in chat right now. If you keep dancing with the devil, eventually, like, the penalty is going to be due. The Miami just the defense is just very suspect, and once you have one game where the offense is not on point all the time, you're going to have that happen. And even with all of that, there was a fairly good shot that Miami could have driven down the field in the last play, but Cam had one of his very few, if I think maybe only second fumble of the year, that actually counted for anything, and they lost. And I'm not going to go as far as like JD Pickle and On3, who posted something about it being a good thing because it's going to wake them up, because I don't know that the Miami defense is going to wake up this year. I still think Miami can win a lot of games and go on a run if the offense is on fire without any errors, but that defense eventually was going to catch up with them. And Georgia Tech just has that thing, and you can drink all you want. I'll say it as many times as everybody wants today. Like Georgia Tech, even in the Paul Johnson eras, was just always some degree of kryptonite for Miami. So shout out to Rec Talk and our friends in the GT community. Maybe this means you're going to the Big Ten first. But as I was saying to Moen before we got on the call, all I think it really does, and I know there's some conversations in the chat about it, is probably limit the ACC as well as the Big 12 ultimately to just getting one team in. I make the argument that no conferences deserve, a lot of bids right now, except there's a very few elite teams. But for Miami, once Virginia beat Pittsburgh last night, they're still in control of their own destiny, though I think that the loser of the ACC championship game probably will not get a bid, barring some unforeseen circumstances coming up in the SEC or Big Ten in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think with Notre Dame playing as strong as they are in their schedule that's coming up, I think Big 12 and ACC are only going to get one slot in this playoffs, which that's going to make it very attractive to them when the Big 10 and SEC come around and offer them two AQs. So, I will say, what did you think? Do you think that hurts Cam Ward's chances? Do you still think he's the Heisman front runner? According to betting odds, he was still the front runner.
I don't think he's the Heisman front runner. I would think it would probably take something dramatic happening in conference championship games, like Boise not doing much, or Austin Gentry having a couple of weak games, or Ohio State coming back in the championship game and beating Oregon. Like, I think that's what it would take. And no, Obama, there is definitely a BYU logo up behind me. It's just in between Oregon. It's just south of Oregon. It's just there's no white behind it.
I don't see a Utah logo. Where's the Utah logo? I see Utah State.
Oh, there's a Utah logo somewhere in here. I don't think I blocked it out. If not, I'll fix it, but it should be there somewhere.
Take that one up with Wild U. Yeah. Let's
maybe that's the one I left out. Maybe their AD can cry on, and as he applies for the FSU AD job.
Well, maybe the Big 12 can share some of that $40K they find them, and you can get a graphic designer to fit that in there somewhere. Or Utah State, you can get some of that Utah State money since you got them up there big and bold. Billy Tuesday's in the house. I love that old school Ohio State logo on the profile picture. Good to see you, Billy. My buddy Caleb Ramirez is here. Sorry, Rock and Rant about Miami, but the way they were playing for most of the year, I had a feeling it was coming.
Absolutely.
Sure, but they kind of had that team of destiny feel to them, just like BYU did. They just kind of had that thing that you thought they were going to get out of it every single week.
Totally agree. And last night, probably for those who believe in conspiracy theories and stuff like that, probably plays into that narrative as well. I'm not really into those kind of things. I don't think refs are smart enough to in the instant figure out the right play to be conspiracy theorists on a call.
The ACC, this is from Friends Call Me Sean, the ACC and Big 12 should cancel their championship games. So each has 2 one-loss teams. I'm only being half serious. No ACC or Big 12 2-loss teams will get into the playoff. I don't disagree with you there.
Not as it currently stands, barring some sort of unexpected developments.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12 race is still pretty open, believe it or not. There's still a lot of teams that have paths to the championship game, but right now it looks like it's going to be BYU and Colorado.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the good consensus right now.
Looks like Nate gifted 5 memberships to the channel through the College Football Mafia account. I don't have YouTube up. I've got StreamYard up right now, so I can't see who those went to. If you received those, welcome to the big College Football Mafia family. Glad to have you. You can visit the members only section, use the members only emotes, and we always defer to members' comments in chat. If you did receive one of those, consider paying it forward and gifting one to somebody else. That's always appreciated. Antoine Codes, ASU has a chance to have a very quiet 10-win season. I don't think it'd be very quiet if they had a 10-win season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing.
Yeah, 3 very tough games left, including the Territorial Cup. Yeah, Arizona State's impressed. Dillingham has went in there and turned that program around. Illini Ted's in the house. Good to see you, Illini Ted. Kayla Ramirez has a question for you. Was that on the coaching at Miami or the players at Miami?
Oh, I think everyone can own a piece of that complete and utter show that was that game. There were people not holding assignments. There were, less dumb penalties than Miami normally gets, but inopportune ones. And, everyone from Cam Ward holding onto the ball like one too many times, doing a little bit too much hero. That's probably what caused that fumble that killed the drive right there instead of just throwing it away or taking a check down. But there's everyone's got some ownership when they get to look at the film from the coaches on down.
Yep, you win as a team, you lose as a team. Notre Dame looking good. That's from Ray in LA. Yeah, Notre Dame's looking really good. They have bounced back strong from that Northern Illinois loss. Jan Hulk says, hey, all. Good to see you, Jan, all the way from Slovenia. Doc Gibbs says, Miami was always overrated, barely scraping by against weak ACC opponents. Their overrating was 1983 Miami legacy of brand basis.
Cool story, Doc. What team do you root for, by the way? I'm just curious. Actually, don't know.
I was going to say Miami has 5 national championships. It wasn't just 1983.
Yeah, 2001 was the last one, granted a long time ago, but I love getting trolled by some people from schools who haven't won one in their lifetime, so it's all good. I don't know if that applies to Doc Gibbs, though, to be honest. So
they have one more recently than Notre Dame, but to hear Notre Dame fans tell it, you wouldn't believe it. If West Virginia wins out, do you think they have a possible chance to play in the Big 12 championship game? Some people got to fall in front of them, Timothy. But it's still, I think they're still in the race too. It's that Big 12 race is wide open. Cam Ward is the new college Caleb Williams. As long as he's not the pro Caleb Williams, I think that's not a bad thing.
We shall see.
I was hoping to see Wild Ute talk about his AD. Again, tune in Tuesday at 8 p.m. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people with Schadenfreude who want to see Ute suffer or blow up or rant. That'll be on Tuesday. So do tune in Tuesday for the Big 12 Mafia Show when they talk all things Big 12, Holy War included. We will get a little bit into the Holy War. First things first, let's bring up the new AP Top 25. This has been probably the most contentious Top 25 I've seen all season. The Twitter sphere, X sphere, whatever you want to call it, sphere, is ranting and raving about this. So let's take a look at it. Oregon, number 1, rightfully so. Undefeated. Yep. Got to win over Ohio State. Ohio State, number 2. Some people can make an argument there. Only loss came on the road at Oregon by 1 point, and the game required a rule change after the fact. Texas is number 3. They had a really good win yesterday. Looked very dominant. Penn State is number 4 again. Get right game for them against Washington in the whiteout. Pickles will have something to say about that tomorrow. He was not happy about
sure.
some of the things that went on during the end of that game. Number 5 is the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 5 is the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 5 is the Indiana Hoosiers. I never thought I would be announcing a top 5 Indiana Hoosiers squad.
And if I'm not mistaken, didn't they leapfrog Tennessee?
They did leapfrog Tennessee. And for the first time in school history, they have a 10-win season. They've got a bye this week, so they got to get rested up and prepare because they've got the biggest game of their season the following week against Ohio State in Columbus. Tennessee moved up, actually. Tennessee to 6. BYU moved up to 7. Notre Dame at 8. Alabama to 9. Alabama looked really good against LSU. Did you happen to see any of that game?
Yeah, I saw all of it. I was pretty surprised. I actually thought that, I think LSU with at night under Brian Kelly was 13-0 at home in Death Valley. So I thought it would be a close game. I actually thought LSU would win based off of the recent performances of both teams, but I'm not really going to cry about Brian Kelly losing.
Yeah, that was a Jalen Milroe show. I mean, if the Heisman race really opens up here, Jalen Milroe has a shot, a legitimate shot to get in that race. He is basically a one-man team for the Crimson Tide. Ole Miss had a very good win against Georgia, played very well. Carson Beck is not the answer at Georgia. Just looked awful. He's looked awful the last 3 weeks.
I don't remember if he was draft eligible last year, but that guy did some damage to his draft stock this year by coming back. Again, I don't remember whether he was draft eligible or not.
And then we have Miami, who fell to Georgia Tech. They moved down to 12.
I don't have any issue with that. I think that's fair.
I don't know. I probably would have still kept them in my top 10.
But I mean, it's not like out of line, right? A lot of, Georgia dropped down a bunch of spots. Now we get to the whole question of like 2 loss versus 1 loss teams and all of this stuff. But, I wasn't surprised that it was that much. I guess is a good way of putting it. And it's not really causing me stress.
I definitely would put them in front of Georgia. Ole Miss had a quarterback with basically one leg, and they dominated that Georgia team. And that quarterback with one leg was scrambling on them and getting 12 and 15 yards. Boise State at number 13 looks like they'll probably be the G5 representative. I don't hold out much hope that Army is going to beat Notre Dame. SMU at number 14. We talked about this. We touched on this. SMU and Miami control their own destiny now. They can face each other in the ACC title game, supposing they both win out. Texas A&M is at 15, and I said it last 2 weeks ago that I thought Texas A&M was in the SEC race. Looked like after last week's loss, that wasn't going to be the case. They are back in the SEC race, y'all. So SEC's wide open. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I don't know what happened. Nick Saban retires, and the absolute shit hits the fan. The SEC now has more parity than I can remember ever seeing the SEC have. It's just craziness.
There was something today posted about like there are scenarios where there's like a 6 or 7 way tie for first place when the season ends.
Yeah, Missouri is still up there too. They've still got a shot at LSU. I think still has a shot at it. Army Black Knights at number 16. They have to play Notre Dame next. Listen, after what Notre Dame did to Florida State, and we all know Florida State is not having the best of years. But I think they laid 53. It was 53-3, I believe, at the end of that game. It was ugly. It was really ugly. Clemson got a big win over Virginia Tech. Good for Clemson. They still have a shot at the ACC championship, but they need things to fall their way for that to happen. Correct. Colorado has the inside track on the Big 12 championship. They just have to win out. Washington State's up there. Kansas State is still in the Big 12 hunt. They need some things to fall their way. LSU just can't stop the run. Could not throw the ball in the rain. It was like a monsoon down there, but that defense is awful. Terrible defense. Louisville at 22, South Carolina at 23, Mizzou at 24, and then Tulane at number 25, the Green Wave.
The Tulane and, Army, these schools, I don't know if anybody saw the Boise State game against Nevada, but Gentry was impressive, but Boise State, that was a pretty close game for a long time in there. And Nevada kind of caused some of their own problems. There's a world where that goes differently, and Boise's looking different today as a program as far as the playoff goes. So you never know. I don't put it past Boise losing to UNLV in a championship game in the Mountain West or whoever they wind up playing.
Yeah, they could. But, I mean, right now their only loss is to number 1 Oregon. So
for sure.
Got to have them on the inside track.
Absolutely.
Jan Hulk says Indiana at number 5 in week 12. Never thought that would happen in football. Yeah, it's been a shock to quite a few of us. Doc Gibbs says, is it true that some Indiana coaches and key players came in from James Madison? Absolutely.
I think it's more than 10.
I think it's 11 is the exact number. They had 11 transfers from James Madison. Stormy Cyclone. Tough loss yesterday, Stormy. I don't know what happened to that vaunted defense. So the Utah AD losing it and slamming the refs in the Big 12 is a bad look. A $40,000 fine is mild. They are not happy in the Big 12. $40,000 fine to me is not mild. That's 40
Right.
grand. That's a car.
Well, do you want to use this to talk about that whole scenario and that whole scene more? Or you want to go through some
Well,
comments first and come back to it?
we'll talk about it. Listen, I watched the game. Nate and Ute convinced me to stay up. Had to stay up till 2 a.m. That's my first problem with it. There was a slot open on Fox at 8 p.m. I don't know why the Big 12 did not schedule themselves in 8 p.m. I don't know if they were afraid of the competition with Notre Dame, Florida State, Alabama, LSU. Those were not competitive games. I think this game would have done much better ratings if they could have somehow got it into an 8 p.m. time slot. Just a terrible time slot, having to wait till I don't think kickoff was till 10:30 on the Eastern Seaboard. So that was terrible with all the commercials. It was past 2 a.m. when it ended. I know that because I went out like a light afterwards.
I'm not 100% sure of this, so somebody can correct me in the chat, but I do remember seeing a lot of Big 12 fans complaining that ESPN put it at that game. So I'm wondering if what happened is, however, Fox and ESPN get to pick games throughout the season, if they had the next pick and they picked that game, and then they ultimately chose this time slot that went, even though there was something available on Fox, and which just would bring more of the wrath of yet another conference into the ESPN universe. I think that penalty itself was, I don't think it was egregious, but I also don't think it was nothing. And I tend to come from the zone of, like, if it's a penalty, it's a penalty. If you see it, you call it. I know you can call a penalty on every game, but the refs don't see a penalty necessarily on every single play in there. But I understand Utah fans being pissed. The timing of it was horrible. You thought that you had like your season saving by beating a big rival in that kind of zone. But you know what? We a few weeks ago destroyed a couple of other schools for throwing crap on the field. And now we've seen a few other schools do it. And when you have like somebody throwing water bottles, it hits a cheerleader in the head and knocks them unconscious. Like, that's freaking disgusting. Grow the hell up. Stop being a bunch of children. And it's completely unacceptable. And then as far as the athletic director, really bad look. Like, I get it. I get the frustration, but what you did is not advancing your cause, in my opinion, with the conference. If anything, you're just becoming either somebody that people feared about your school, whether that's right or wrong. And even if you had a lot of merit in your anger about the call being bad, that is not going to help you get the next call.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing about Texas Tech. I get it's fun to throw tortillas on the field, but when your coach has to tell you to stop throwing tortillas on the field so they can get a review done, yeah, just can we stop, guys? Nobody needs to throw crap on the field. When it comes to the penalty, listen, that was holding. It was holding. My issue with it is that they were letting calls like that go all night. Yep. I think if you're going to be the officials, you have to call it one way or the other. You're either going to let them play or you're going to call penalties. They spent 3 quarters letting them play. There was a bad and makeup calls. There were makeup calls. There was a bad face mask call in the first half. And then the refs made some makeup calls to try and erase that bad face mask call once they knew it was a bad face mask call.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The consistency is definitely an issue. Like, figure out if you're calling it a tight game or a not tight game, and don't put the flag away later or start taking you out a lot later, depending upon everything. But no matter what, that was still down on the 1 yard. That was a 1 yard line. You get the penalty. You still had multiple plays, and the one thing that Utah's had all season is your defense. And you still could have, despite getting, even if it was an egregiously bad call, you still had a chance to stop them.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, no, BYU won the game. I'm not going to argue that point. BYU won. BYU deserved to win. I don't think he was thrown to that one receiver on the deep ball. I think it just got out of his hand, and that guy was in the right place at the right time. But sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But yeah, I mean, it's just, again, I think we're probably going to have to move to like some kind of unified officiating system.
Please.
Because unfortunately, in this country, Utah fans were on Twitter all last night. Big 12 was doing this to screw over Utah. They wanted to protect BYU's undefeated season. This is conference shenanigans. Obviously, their AD went out there and said something incredibly stupid, and it's going to cost him $40,000, and that's I don't think that's mild. I don't know how much money he makes a year, but that's
Yeah,
that's a good chunk of Americans' salary per year.
yeah. I guess it depends upon how his contract deals with that being paid, if and how whether he has to be paid. Well, I guess I'm more curious to see what fine Utah gets for the on the field throwing of stuff that Texas A&M. I think what got or who was it? Somebody got $250,000 fine for things being thrown, right? I
Texas,
think it
yeah.
was Texas A&M, right? And which we laughed about because that's like a rounding error for them
Well,
relative
it
to how
was the
much.
University of Texas. It wasn't Texas
Oh,
A&M.
University of Texas.
Yeah, it
Sorry,
was
that
the
that game,
Longhorns.
right? University of Texas game. Um, and we laughed about it being a rounding error, but nobody that I recall got like hurt in any meaningful way, just out of pure luck. People don't get what the hell a full water bottle does when you throw it from 30 yards away and like 50 feet up. But I'll be curious to see what the further ramifications are, if any, for Utah beyond the AD getting fined for the press conference.
Yep. Last thing I will say on the game is I liked the uniforms. The solid reds versus the solid blues was very cool look. I really liked it. Seemed really kind of poppy to me, but it was cool.
Yeah, definitely. It looked great on TV.
Yeah, but I don't know why we have to keep saying this. Stop throwing shit on the field. Act like you got some sense. My grandma would say, act like you got some goddamn sense, even if you ain't. All right. Sergeant Pickles is in the house. Good evening, guys. Got to hold my head high after that butt whooping the Huskies took. Beat UCLA this week, and they still make a bowl. There you go. Got to
Much
find that
tougher
silver
game.
lining.
Much tougher game now than if it had been part of the early part of the season.
Yeah,
Got to give Deshaun Foster some credit.
we will definitely talk about that on the Big Ten Mafia show tomorrow. UCLA has really turned it around. I mean, Iowa had been very dominant in the weeks leading up to that game, and UCLA just really handled them pretty well. But I will see you tomorrow, Sergeant Pickles, and you could talk about James Franklin running up the score on you because his feelings were hurt by Ohio State. Nathan Campbell says, Mo, and I have a question. If Florida State and Clemson Big Ten and the Big Ten wants to go into Texas, what school would they take to be A&M or Texas Tech? If they had their choice, they would take A&M. Nothing against Texas Tech. Lubbock's not a big enough market.
Moen, if just playing that scenario out, and even if it's fantasy land, because it wouldn't happen, would the Big Ten, in your estimation, take anyone out of Texas that was not Texas or Texas A&M,
No.
even though they want to get into the market for like fit to the schools?
I think ultimately, and we had this discussion on Friday's show. I think ultimately the SEC and Big Ten are going to have a scheduling alliance. And I think part of that scheduling alliance is going to be working out who gets what. It might not be written down on paper, but I think at some point the Big Ten is going to be told stay out of Texas. Big Ten will abide that as long as SEC doesn't help out Notre Dame at all. And eventually they'll find peace. It'll be like that scene in The Godfather where Tattaglia and Corleone make peace, and then you realize it was Barzini all along.
So is Barzini your mark? Or is
I don't know who Barzini is in that equation. Probably Jim Delaney. Jim Delaney's pulling the strings still. Illini Ted says, so according to the AP, the CFP, 1 Oregon, 2 Texas, 3 BYU, 4 Miami, 5 Ohio State, 6 Penn State, 7 Indiana, 8 Tennessee, 9 Notre Dame, 10 Alabama, 11 Ole Miss, 12 Boise State. We'll find out on Tuesday. Again, I know there were a lot of BYU fans who were not happy last week that the committee had BYU as number 9. Of course, they get one of the top 4 seeds as a projected conference champion, but I know a lot of BYU fans felt disrespected by that number 9 ranking. We'll see how the committee handles this after the Holy War this week.
BYU, I'd be less worried about that, just like Miami should be less worried about their seed and ranking and more worried about you guys got to play better if you're going to beat the version of Colorado that's playing right now.
Illini Ted says, how crazy would it be to see Indiana hosting Alabama? I have a feeling that Indiana would have that moved to Lucas Oil Stadium. I don't think they would host that game in Bloomington.
But wouldn't that negate a possible advantage on the weather?
I don't think so. I think the way Indiana's built, that Cignetti style offense, he wants a fast field. I mean, they're fast route runners. It's quick pass outs. I think that they would want that. And the other reason they would want it in Lucas Oil Stadium is they're going to have a lot of tickets.
Right.
You know,
You got to be really smart though if you're Indiana though, because if you put those up too easily for people to come in, you're going to wind up selling way more disproportionately to Alabama than you want.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right there. But I just don't see them sticking it in Bloomington. They could, though. Very well could. Speaking of possible SEC schools going north, Nitwit says, hey, guys, good to see you, Nitwit. Big win for Penn State. Could you imagine an SEC team coming into Beaver Stadium there during a whiteout game as a playoff game?
That would be pretty awesome. Way more intimidating than going into Texas in Austin. It'd be more like the North version of going into Death Valley.
Yeah, it's intense, and I told Pickles that it's hard to go in there and win a whiteout game. In fact, the only time James Franklin has beat Ohio State was during a whiteout game. Nitwit says a close loss to Oregon for Boise State. Absolutely. Nitwit does not think it was holding. There's spirit of the law and letter of the law. Letter of the law, it was holding. Spirit of the law, you've let them play all game. Got to make up your mind.
But I don't think it was like they did that holding was 56 and a 55. It just wasn't 85 and a 55.
Right. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that BYU still had to drive down the field and get into field goal range and kick a field goal against the Utah defense that had been shutting them down most of the night. So, Moen, does Florida State and Clemson leaving open up the ACC for other schools to leave? No, Notre Dame does that. Notre Dame leaves, all hell's going to break loose. FF18 Buffs, good to see you, Buffs. If Prime signs a new long-term contract and Colorado has $20 million in NIL, how soon would the Big Ten invite them? Kansas and Colorado are border states with good brands and good media cores in Kansas City and Denver. Again, if the Big Ten goes to 24, they're going to need 2 more teams out west. In that case, maybe.
But it's not going to be because of Prime.
Right.
Because you can't decide who you're going to marry because somebody's boss is cool and is effective right now when they're not going to be there forever and your theoretical marriage is going to last a long time, at least as is concerned with how the Big Ten operates. Granted, we don't know what's going to happen in the landscape of college football, but if your premise is, people don't leave the Big Ten, you're going to be there for a long time. There's a lot of good reasons to invite Colorado, and Prime helping them elevate what the brand can be is definitely there. But a long-term contract, but what if he leaves in 10 years and you can't make the decision just off of that?
Yeah, the other thing I think Kansas probably is a better fit for the SEC at this point with the border war with Missouri.
I just had to call out Rec Talk right there.
Oh, FSU still in the ACC and Cristobal loses to Georgia Tech. It's like we're in a time loop.
Other than one's a mirror image. Miami's 9-1 and FSU is 1-9. Georgia Tech started the fall and either gave Miami the wake up call or maybe started 2017 part 2. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's another thing, Buffs, I would bring up here. You got to make sure you sign Prime to that extension because Florida State fans are already opening the checkbook trying to get Norvell out of there and get Dion in there. So,
Mo, did you see before we went on that Norvell fired both coordinators and his wide receiver coach?
I did not see that, but it doesn't shock me. That's usually what you have to do. Cam Akers was also that's interesting because Cam Akers was highly touted as a head coaching prospect last offseason. So, but then again, when you're
FAU,
1-9 and get 50 points dropped on you and you can only muster 3, that's to be expected.
FAU also fired some more coordinators today. Like the whole
Yeah.
trend of uh, coordinators taking the fall in an era where buying out coaches in an uncertain future seems to be taking hold for head coaches with long contracts or big buyouts. Um, Coordinators definitely not the safest position to be on a mediocre or underperforming team right now.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen the same thing in Purdue the week before Purdue fired their offensive coordinator, and or it might have been 2 weeks ago, and Ryan Walters took over play calling duty. They still lost 45-0 against Ohio State. It's a head coaching thing. It's not. I know shit rolls downhill, but sometimes the buck has to stop with the head coach. Sergeant Pickle says, calling it now. Ohio State 12-1 beats Oregon 12-1 in the Big Ten title game. Knock on wood. Let's make that happen. 4 big teams make the playoff. I agree with 3 of them hosting. I think that would be one of the coolest things ever as a Big Ten fan. Just as long as Ohio State gets that first round bye. Nitwit says, but Utah needed to put the foot on BYU's throat and they did not close the deal. Absolutely. Call regardless. Yes. Call was made. It was 15 yards. They were down within the 5-yard line. So it's not like it was, it put them into field goal range.
Yeah, they had 40 or 50 yards to go.
Yeah. And again, that was I don't think he intended to throw that pass to that receiver, but that receiver was in the right place at the right time. It's just one of them Cinderella seasons for BYU, it looks like. Illini Ted says, my problem with it is there has been bad referee calls costing teams this year. Other ADs didn't have meltdowns after it. Fans, sure, they are fans, but the admin has to have a higher standard. Yeah, if you actually watched the end of the game, the AD was actually bawling out one of the officials on the field before he even made those comments. And Kyle Whittingham would not shake Satake's hand. So, and he was bawling out an official as well. So,
as someone who's new to learning about the history of both that rivalry, but also over the last 10 months or 12 months, the reputation that Utah may have had or not had with the Pac-12 or Big 12 conference members in different regard, that was, sort of played into the narrative that I wasn't aware of and had heard it through being associated with the CFB Mafia and the various shows and knowing a lot more about the Big 12 generally than I ever did before. So not a good look. Again, granted, understand the frustration and the emotions about that stuff. People say stupid and do dumb things, but when you're getting paid that kind of bank, you're paid to not do it in the moment.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. It was not a good look for the Utah AD. I completely understand the frustration, but sometimes you're better just being thoughtful instead of opening your mouth and removing all doubt. Nitwit says college football has a referee problem, and this is what you get. Again, I think there needs to be a universal referee system in the Autonomous Four. I don't believe it should be controlled by the conferences. I think that's where we get conspiracy theories. And trust me, I say this as an Ohio State fan. I've heard this from years from Penn State fans, Michigan fans, Iowa fans, how refs gift Ohio State calls to maintain perfect seasons or make sure they get a playoff spot. I think that needs to go away. I think we need a universal referee system.
Or especially in like out of conference games earlier in the season where most of the times the P4 teams get to bring their refs with them. It also plays into that narrative as well, even outside of the conference when, the P4 team's on the road playing somebody that usually have their conference refs in tow.
Yeah, I mean, you could even go back to that Ohio State Georgia playoff game a couple years ago when Pac-12 officials were the officials in the game, and it was after USC and UCLA announced they were leaving the Pac-12. And you had a lot of people saying that there was some funny cooking there because the Pac-12 officials were more or less pissed because they were getting laid off. Apparently, some officials were told they were coming to the Big Ten, and some were told they weren't coming to the Big Ten. Probably not a very good idea by the Big Ten. That call on its own was 50-50 for me. Bigger issue is the inconsistency. That's my issue too, Pickles. You're going to let them play, let them play. If you're going to call it tight, call it tight. Contact within the 5-yard area. The receiver made a cut and lost his balance, but the guy's hands were underneath his shoulder pad. That is defensive holding. Utah fans will do well to remember getting a massive call in their favor to beat USC in the Pac-12 title game. Yeah, I mean, referee calls go both ways. They cut both ways.
I mean, look at me and Moen. We do this show together. Doesn't mean I forget about 2001 or 2002, and doesn't mean that he doesn't look at it a completely opposite way.
Listen, it was a pass interference. The flag was just late. Guy had trouble getting
late. Like all the fireworks
pants.
were over late.
Yeah. The guy just had trouble getting the flag out of his pants. He had it stuck in his belt loop.
Yeah, he was waiting to make sure the check cleared.
We'll have to go back and find out whose conference was calling that game.
Yeah, we do.
The refs on a 4th down stop in the Pitt, Virginia game replayed the down because they were not in position. I did not know that. I did not see that on the highlights.
I did not know that, and I did not know that was a thing you could even do. So is that like a new rule that I just missed? I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Nitwit.
Yeah, let us know, Nitwit. Let us know more. Can. Sergeant Pickle says UCLA isn't an easy game, but the LA schools traditionally do not play well in Seattle.
UCLA nobody plays very well in Seattle. Nobody traditionally plays well up in Seattle. Like, that's a great home field advantage that Washington has.
This is from Timothy Green. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Thank you very much. Pause. Yes, please like. If you would, share it with your friends and family. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. If you're watching on demand and want to leave a comment and tell us how wrong we are or how right we are, how handsome we are, how ugly we are, how annoying our voices sound, please do that in the comment section below. Every comment helps us in the algorithm. Nathan Campbell says, does Texas Tech go SEC? No, they stay Big 12. Tony Lawson says, the Greek squirt gun kicked me in the junk. I was texting back and forth with Greg yesterday. Told him a tough loss, but that was the Kaliak Manis revenge game. Rec Talk says 0.0. Or I don't know if that's supposed to be eyes. If it's an Animal House reference, I'm all for it.
Probably some engineering talk.
Rocket Rant is a real one. Wish all fans were like him. We carried the goalposts to the president of the school's pool, threw them in and jumped in with the goalposts. Never seen anything like it. If that's true, I hope you didn't damage the pool line.
You're just trying to compete with Vanderbilt up the road, up the freeway and to the left.
Well, I'm sure at least if they did damage the pool, they will engineer a better one.
Oh, FYI, Rec Talk for anyone on there. I saw that some reporter talked about how some Miami player went to varsity after the game in uniform. It wasn't a player. I'm not saying you said it, but just FYI, that's a guy who wears Miami uniform in honor of his brother who passed away to every game he goes to and is profiled in College Game Day. So reporters are lazy across the world.
Yes, but the varsity does make good food.
They make hardly good, bad, good food.
They understand the power of grease.
That is definitely a varsity thing. Is definitely grease. They should bottle it.
Fried in lard. Firing coordinators is the new frugal trend. Schools can sell that as we are doing something, but still not be on the hook for paying out of a long contract. 100% agree. As we say in the scientific field, shit rolls downhill. There was video of both coaches getting a hug on the field. I saw that, but there was no handshake. Town Hawk, king of chaos to come, aka Kansas, is in the house. BYU and Colorado, we are coming for you. Where were you all the first half of the season, Kansas offense? Where?
But it would be awesome to watch the chaos of Kansas pull. If Kansas plays the way they did the other day in those two games, it will be insanity.
Yeah, but they need stuff to happen in front of them. They need stuff to fall their way in order to get in there.
I just mean for them just being a disruptor, not that it plays to anything other than, if they have them on the schedule, like what can they do if they play the way people forecast them to play in the beginning of the season, at the end of the year, finally, even if it doesn't turn around the whole season for Kansas.
Yeah. If you're wondering why I wear the Kansas hat tonight, I lost a bet. So I am wearing the Kansas hat. I lost 2 bets, actually. I lost one of them on money, too. Thank you again, Iowa State. That's the second time. Second time this year, Iowa State, you've busted a 5-game parlay on me. Come on, guys. Come on, Cyclones. You got to do me a little better than that. But I will give the Jayhawks a squat. FF18 Buffs says, when I said Colorado and 20 million NIL, I mean we have that locked and loaded. Prime going to have the best roster in Big 12 moving forward. Part of him staying. I don't disagree with you there. I do think he's going to have the best, one of, if not the best roster in the Big 12.
I don't doubt that will happen, but I will just interject that Mike Norvell says hello.
Yeah. Trust me, the Florida State people are already trying to come up with ways to pay off Mike Norvell and give Dion enough money to get.
Yeah, but even separate from that, they were saying the same thing last year at this time, right before the snub, and even after things happened, because that's why they re-upped him for all that. Now, granted, I'm not trying to compare the legacy and history of Dion as a player and the personality, but things change a lot, I guess, in the NIL era and the portal era, and we'll see how it plays out. I would not doubt whatsoever that plays out the way 18 Buffs is saying, but just be careful.
Yeah, I will say this. Dion has paid for himself 10 times over since coming to Colorado. Even if he doesn't put winning product on the field, he's putting fans in the stands. The Big 12's media contract, when it comes up next, Colorado is basically buoying a lot of that viewership in the Big 12. If you go back a couple weeks here on the channel, you did a whole segment on the Big 12 Mafia show about Big 12 viewership, and it's not even close. Colorado is number 1 by a mile. So
polarizing brands make bank for people.
Yep.
And he helped
Everybody
to
loves
basically
a villain.
polarize Colorado. And Ring fans too. Like lovers and haters watch as much, if not more, than the lovers.
Are CFB referees vetted when hired beyond ref experience, such as family history, relationships, if any, to schools they may referee? I'm sure they are, but I don't know if anybody has Netflix. You can go back and watch the documentary they did on Tim Donaghy, the NBA official, and realize that there isn't a referee that's above corruption, and if the Big 12 is signing your paychecks, it's easy for people to make a logical jump that says, well, you're doing this to benefit the Big 12.
The appearance of impropriety is the thing. It doesn't have to be impropriety to be the issue.
Minnesota and Jacksonville would have made the Big proud. 12-7.
The Iowa Bowl last year.
Clay Johansson, he says GB. I'm not going to say it.
Go Blue.
But yeah, they hung in there in the second half. They gave Indiana a game. Indiana might not have 10 wins if Michigan had a quarterback. I mean, they're back to their original starter for the season. They put Orgy in there. I don't know why they keep trying to put Orgy in there, but they put him in there in the first play. He fumbled. So Witt did hug handshake with Sataki while chewing out refs. Much of Utes' reaction is a mad cause bad situation where their horrible season, is boiling over and they're lashing out at refs. Big 12. but you can understand it. Rec Talk running down the varsity. The varsity is ass anyway. Should have asked me about Vortex.
I'll let him know next time, whenever the next round in Georgia Tech is.
I like varsity.
Actually, for the Peach Bowl, like in theory, if Miami and SMU go, they'll be in the Peach Bowl. So Atlanta would be calling again in a few weeks.
Hey, Moan, how about my Cougars 9-0? You might have to go back a little, Earl Carr. We kind of talked about the game. Big win for BYU, obviously. Their Cinderella season continues. Probably the team that most people had originally suggested was going to finish at the bottom, that'll likely finish at the top of their conference. Rock and Rent. What do you think about the game yesterday? I think you kind of touched on that earlier, Nathan. You might have to go back.
I'll just play off of the typo and say that Georgia, Miami's living rent. Georgia Tech is living rent free in Miami's heads right now. So
the portal giveth and the portal taketh away. It's true. Sometimes the portal giveth you things, and you think you've got a top 10 team, and you're sitting at 1-9, getting blown out by Notre Dame.
Yeah, that was rough. But Ole Miss, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, in their portal acquisitions weren't necessarily delivering the way everyone wanted, and now their defense is on fire, and they had a really amazing performance against Georgia. So still got games left to figure out it.
Town Hawk says personality and superstars drive ratings. Colorado has both. Yes, they do.
And they'll have one for a few more games. They have
more
and
games.
The coach will stay.
Yeah, next season, if he sticks around, he's gonna. He's not gonna have Hunter anymore. He's not gonna have both of his sons there.
And I don't think anyone can name one other player on that team right now. If he tried,
I can, but it's just because he's an Ohio State transfer. Yes, refs are heavily vetted. I don't think anyone realized it's harder to become a D1 ref than athlete by stats. Very good to know. Thank you for letting us know, Rec Talk. Illini Ted, which fan base is holding their breath more about their coach this offseason, Indiana or Colorado or someone else? I mentioned this on Twitter. I think Indiana is okay. Kirk Cignetti had basically said when he took the job, the TV money was the biggest deal for him. He knew with the TV money coming in, he could go there and build something. Colorado has me worried because his sons are leaving.
But I don't know where, Florida State's not probably making that kind of move. I don't even know whether, it's his school, so I get it, but, it's hard to tell whether the perception of being, snubbed before is a grudge that holds forever, or if ultimately money talks. But if there's a second bidder for the same amount of money, is like payback come in another form. So I'm just curious, and Colorado can do a very clear math equation of how much Dion has been worth to the school, right? They know what they were doing before, what they were doing there. And honestly, the Big 12 can do the math equation too about how the Colorado ratings going into a negotiating period in a couple more years. There's interesting value there in these bigger conversations. But I would guess Colorado more because Dion is a wild card, and Cignetti's an older coach. He's getting his moment here, and he's been winning for a while, but he's not like the quintessential guy. He's a little bit older in his career.
Yeah, and I think I agree with what he said. That Big Ten media deal made it very easy for him to go in there and say, hey, look, we've got all this media money rolling in. Why not Indiana? He brought in some of his guys, but his recruiting is going to be doing quite well after this season. It's not going to be as hard to recruit kids to come to Bloomington as it used to be. Would Prime take the Dallas Cowboys job if offered? That team needs a new voice. That team needs a new owner. You're muted. You're muted, Rock.
I was going to say, if anybody wants to buy the Jets too while they're buying the Cowboys, I'm totally game for that.
Also, if anybody wants to buy the Bengals, I am also for that. Because we know Mike Brown ain't going to spend any money. Illini Ted, neither are. Being a greedy job jumper is probably over. Signetti and Prime have really good situations that they own. Very true. More fun being the boss. Stop with Prime and NFL. Never going to happen.
Yeah. I think the same applies. Like, I don't know that Lane Kiffin's going anywhere, even if Florida was in the market for somebody. Like, if they keep performing and they get into the playoff, like, he's going to get whatever money he needs to stay at Ole Miss.
And I don't think that there's going to be a better job. I mean, Florida said they're sticking with Billy Napier, which that might be the trend now. You just stick with it because you don't want to pay people off, unless you're Texas A&M. Earl Carr says, Rec Talk, I think you guys are turning a corner down there. That's absolutely true. I think Brent Key was the right hire, right coach.
Yeah, he completely outcoached his staff, completely outcoached Miami, in addition to players not executing.
Tulane head coach might get a call up. Purdue very well could. I know Toledo hasn't had the season obviously they wanted, but I think Jason Candle out of Toledo would be another good hire for Purdue. Or good
I think
candidate.
Tulane head coach is going to have better opportunities than Purdue.
Yeah,
he wants to take them.
That's true, but look at what Kirk Signetti did with Indiana. That media money rolls in. Purdue's the birthplace, the cradle of quarterbacks. It used to be anywhere.
But there's schools in the Big Ten and the SEC that have had media money disproportionate to other conferences and schools for at least a half decade, if not longer, and they didn't necessarily turn him around. Like, it's hard to assume that he is not a relative unicorn.
Town Hawk says Colorado people spending on money on football has never happened before, unless you're the Denver Broncos and you sign Russell Wilson. That is why their facilities have lagged despite best setting in college football, in my opinion. Yeah, you've got some big donors out there in Colorado. So you got that South Park money. This year's UGA versus Georgia Tech game will be a good one. You're probably right. That will be a good one. Georgia's defense, I think, is a little. You're going to have to get some kind of ability to throw the ball a little bit to beat the Georgia defense, but their offense, just pick off Carson Beck 3 or 4 times, you'll be fine. C. John, Big 12 announces public reprimand and fine of Utah's AD Mark Harlan. Haha, Utah is a disaster. Schadenfreude.
Definitely in the running for top 5 most disappointing seasons in a different way than some other schools. And I said to Ute on Twitter, the comments of the AD afterwards were in the top 5 of dumbest comments of 2024 in a world that has Mike Gundy's DWI comments in that running as well.
Yeah, I can understand. He got emotional. Shouldn't have got emotional. Or he shouldn't have spoke being that emotional. Should have taken some time to cool off.
Yeah, he doesn't normally go to the press conferences from what I understand. So like that would be a great moment to not change it up and gather your thoughts and figure out what you want to say while you light up the back office before you do the public comments.
Will Wake Forest get 6 wins? I don't know who Wake Forest's remaining schedule is.
Well, they play Miami is one of them. I don't know who their other game is.
They're not beating Miami. Even with Miami's defense, I don't think they're beating Miami.
No, they're not.
And I think Duke is their traditional end of season rival. I believe that's correct, and I think Duke would beat them too. So I don't think so. Georgia will have their hands full with Tennessee next week. Depends on what Tennessee shows up. It's Tennessee that played against Arkansas. I don't know. Might be a race to the bottom.
And that game's in Athens, so they have that advantage. I think College game day is going there, which is relatively boring to me when they keep going to the same places over and over again.
So it's Duke, Miami, and North Carolina for Wake Forest. So Duke and Miami, those are losses. North Carolina, who knows? If Mac Brown announces maybe before the game that he is retiring, kids get up to play for Mac. Moen, do you think Oklahoma's head coach stays? Depends on who's available.
He
I
could be
think,
the exception to
yeah,
the keeping your head coaches around.
yeah. It's been a bad year for Oklahoma. First year in the SEC, and it's been a bad one. Obviously, yesterday that was kind of a fluky win by Missouri, but you know what? Again, sometimes it's better be lucky than good. And Oklahoma's been really unlucky. He benched that kid early in the season. That did him no favors, and he brought him back. Yeah. Will Nick Saban go to coach Wake Forest? No. No, 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 no. I think Nick's done coaching, so no. Army versus Notre Dame. Who you got? I've got Notre Dame by 28.
I'd love to say Army. I'll pray for Army, but I just don't see that happening as much as I would love it to happen.
Tony Lawson says Notre Dame by 50. Okay.
I
Speaking of
don't
which,
think Notre Dame by 50. If they barely beat Florida State by 50. It was close though. I
speaking of
don't think they're
which, let's go ahead and get to our standings for week 11 here. Rock again, best picker in the game, went 5-3 this week. He leads the field at 52 and 36. Bomber went 2 for 6. Ute went 3 for 5. I went 1 for 7. Pickles went 4 for 4. Becky went 4 for 4. Spreads absolutely killed everybody this week.
Yeah, I mean, Bomber, I think, went like in the other one that's just a straight picking one. I think he was like 9-1. So he was like the drama comedy masks in terms of picks going.
Yeah, he picked 7-1 the week before here on the against the spread. And he was saying this is a comeback. And then he asked me this morning, he said, how did I do? I said, not as bad as me, but not as good as others. And he knew that was a bad sign. But we all unanimously picked Indiana. Indiana did not cover. We all unanimously picked Miami. Obviously, Miami did not cover. Everybody but Ute took BYU. BYU did not cover. So tough games on the spread this week.
Were there any other outlier games? Did I pick somebody that nobody else did? Is that like what made the difference?
Let's see here. Week 11. So you picked Ole Miss. You, along with Bomber, picked Ole Miss, and that was correct. Everybody else had Georgia. You picked Colorado. That was correct. You picked Alabama. That was correct. The only one I think I hit was Penn State. You also picked Washington, BYU, Miami were your misses, and then Notre Dame was a win, which I thought Notre Dame had no shot. 25.5. I thought Florida State will get some garbage time touchdowns in there. Florida State, yeah, it'll be close.
Moen, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I promised to never pick Florida State ever again, no matter what the situation
Probably
was
a good
in 2024.
idea.
You might want to add that plus your Iowa State exception just for your own sanity.
Yeah, maybe. Ty Kevin says, is UVA a trap game for Notre Dame? I don't see anybody losing, or Notre Dame losing to anybody for the remainder of the year. They're good.
They
And I
got
hate
their
to say
wake up
that.
call.
Yeah.
They got their wake up call, and they did what they need to do afterwards. After with it.
What are the chances Kansas beats BYU and or Colorado? If the Kansas that showed up this weekend shows up, if that Kansas offense is firing like they were this weekend, I don't think anybody in the Big 12 can stop them.
Yeah, the Kansas team that played yesterday would beat the BYU team that played last night, in my opinion. The Colorado, I have to pick them game, but that's the first time we've seen that team this year. So how much can you I would have Moen probably put that game on our picks, and I will pick it because it's part of the picks. But there's literally no way I would trust Kansas with my actual money at this time.
And I won't trust Iowa State with mine. Does Big Ten think when Notre Dame joins the conference, it must be Big Ten? I mean, they could join the SEC, but they're not going to. They could join the Big 12, but they're not going to. it's going to come down to being part of a group of like-minded institutions, which I think they probably fit better in the Big Ten than they do any of the existing conferences.
It would be utterly stunning, like maybe one of the biggest stories in college football history if Notre Dame joined a conference and then it wasn't the Big Ten. ACC, a few years ago would have been not stunning because of the situation there. But if it was anything other than the Big Ten at this point, I would be stunned.
Monavision, you're in fat guy territory with that win percentage. I know. Hey, listen, if you go to CFB rivalries, I'm doing pretty well. I'm actually at like 68, 69% winning percentage on there. But that's straight up picks, not against a spread. It's a spread that kills me. It's been the spread all season. That's why I lose money.
That's why you play 5-team parlays to make up for it, and then
that's
one
right.
team leaves you out.
5-team parlays are fun, people. You play a 5-team parlay, you can watch football from noon till 2 a.m. 1-7. Good Lord, Moan. Stop taking advice from Pflugar. Yeah. Greg Pflugar and I are not very good against the spread. So what is your best advice to Big 12 and ACC about the Big SEC scheduling alliance? Start their own between those two conferences. May not work when the Big 12 wants the ACC to fold strategically.
I think you have to wait and see exactly what happens for the ACC in terms of how rigid the Big Ten SEC scheduling alliance goes, because if there are still carve outs for games like Clemson, South Carolina, Florida State, Florida, a few of those, you still have some of those games there, but I don't think that I would like to think that the ACC commissioner wouldn't trust the Big 12 commissioner at this point for good reason about what their ulterior motives might be. But if any conference commissioner is going to blow strategy, the leader in the clubhouse will definitely be the ACC. I also don't know all of those games. There's a lot of really interesting games, but I don't know that there's a lot of marquee games necessarily in terms of like doubling audiences unless ahead of time, other than if teams happen to be good that specific year, right? And then it just naturally happens because they're in the top 10 or top 12.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot the Big 12 or the ACC can do about it. I mean, it's the boulder rolling downhill. You can jump in front of it. You're not going to stop it. You're just going to get flattened. I think it's to the best for both conferences to step aside, let it roll, and carve your own niche. I mean, there's plenty of room. I mean, if the Big Ten is Wendy's and the SEC is McDonald's, you can still have a Burger King out there. You can still have a Five Guys. You can still have a Whataburger, an In-N-Out burger, whatever you want to have. There's still going to be room for plenty of college football.
Right.
It's just, look, the Big Ten and the SEC, they pretty much won. They kind of got the Big 12 and the ACC in a bit of a checkmate here. So if they do a scheduling agreement, Notre Dame leaves the ACC, the ACC is going to have an exodus. I think everybody's going to pick apart the ACC. And if the ACC survives, it's not going to be it's going to be similar to what the Pac-12 is now. It's going to be mostly backfilled with like American Conference teams, AAC teams, and yeah. And I think the Big 12 would be number 3. The offense has been on an upward trend last few games. Daniels is coming into form and meshing better with Grimes, which surprised me the most, but I am coming around on him. Yeah, I don't know what the rest of their schedule is. Let me know who they've got to play, Top-Town Hawk. I still think they need people to fall in front of them in order to get into the conference title game. And your bookie, my bookie loves me. Yuga, Georgia Tech is a carve-out game also. Very true. I think Georgia's probably not going to make the college football playoff this year. Again, Nick Saban leaves the SEC and Kirby Smart just falls apart. I think Nick Saban was holding that conference together. I think everybody played up to Nick Saban. If the ACC and the Big 12 combine and remove some lesser brand teams, could that conference compete with the Big 10 and SEC? No.
No. Look, if you take the three, if you just look at the TV ratings this year in the Big 12, right, so far, and for whatever that's worth, so but just a independent arbiter, you got one school disproportionately outperforming the others, and in the ACC, it's Miami, Clemson, then Florida State. So reversing past fortunes as far as like schools that are ranking. There's a couple other schools that outperform some of the teams in the other two conferences, the lesser evils there. But ultimately, you don't have enough of those to do the additive thing that those two conferences are bringing. Could that change individually in a given season? A team could really take off, right, and blow up quick. BYU is a great example of that, but even there, it's still not outdrawing Colorado.
Yeah, and that's the thing the Big 12 has going for it. They do have brands they can build on. BYU is a national brand. Colorado, I would consider Colorado a national brand at this point with what Deion's done there. There's Kansas can be a national brand. Kansas State, Oklahoma State. I mean, there's brands you can build around there, but you're not. This is what I don't understand about the Big 12, and Big 12 people take this as a shot across the bow. Don't compete with the Big 10 or SEC. It's a race you can't win. Just carve out your niche and be the best Big 12 you can be. Be different. Play games on a Thursday night. Schedule competitive matchups. I think you'd be fine.
Plus, I also think if you get to the point that the ACC and Big 12 are deciding to combine, you're going to have big brands be leaving out before that happens, right? So it makes it even harder to go, and you're not going to have all the teams that don't have a home vote themselves out of existence. So you're more likely to lose the top tier and keep everybody else down in some sort of giant conference.
Yeah, I don't think it would work. I don't think the ACC and the Big 12 would mesh well. But I think both conferences will still exist. I just think Big 12 will end up being number 3. Colorado versus Georgia Tech have a series starting next year that is a split 1990 national championship meetup. Looking forward to it.
Good series.
Is that starting in Atlanta or is that starting in Colorado? If Big 12 can't find a way to fix their East Coast terrible viewing times, this could be a bigger problem and underestimated. I think that would resolve itself, Doc Gibbs, by taking ACC schools. I think they grab
it also needs,
yeah,
but it also needs another partner, right? Like SEC, with the Big 12 with a dual partner, they're still not getting the prime spots most of the time over the SEC for ESPN or the Big 10 for Fox with an outside shot here or there. ACC gets some of those currently in their ESPN deal, but still gets a lot of, for whatever reason, Fox loves the big noon game. When you're getting the noon slot on ESPN or ABC, that is not like their prime game for that network.
Yeah, I mean, Turner Sports has been mentioned quite a bit out there. They lost the NBA. They need something to fill that void. Unfortunately, the Big 12 is going to have to sit out this media deal. But, by 2029, 2030 rolling around, they can begin negotiations with Turner Sports, possibly become a Turner Sports exclusive. And then they can go head to head with SEC Big 10. And if it's not a competitive, I mean, like I said, I think the primetime games this week were not competitive. I think if BYU and Utah were on somewhere during that same time frame, I think they could have had much better ratings than they probably did at 10:15 at night. Looks like Kansas has BYU this week, but that's at BYU. Colorado next week, that's in Kansas City at Arrowhead. And then at Baylor to finish, could finish as hottest team around, absolutely. BYU might be vulnerable. I
mean, I just want chaos, period.
Chaos is a friend of mine is the title of the show.
Chaos that makes you like start tuning into games that you didn't think so, and you're like actually caring about the 5th tiebreaker in a conference that's not even where your team is at.
Moen, do you think Kirby end up in Dallas? I don't think they fire the head coach in Dallas. Again, this is an ownership problem. It has been in Dallas since he let go of Jimmy Johnson. Tottown Hawk says TNT and streamers are out there. Peacock is proving stream concept. Yes, I will say this. I watched some of the Penn State Washington game on Peacock yesterday. It was much improved over the Ohio State Michigan State game. The quality was there.
Clock. Yeah, just a clock issue, right? Like you still have to wait out 5 years unless things blow up, right? Contracts are contracts, but the two parties on either side can agree to renegotiate a contract earlier should market forces change. But if you're just waiting for the clock, like think about the last 2 years, waiting for 5 years for that to play out to get you the slots. Like if you're the Big 12 and you're worried about slots right now, which is totally understandable, you have 5 years of living with that reality unless something changes.
MH5 is in the house. He says, "Hey, rock chalk mowing. Chaos Hawks are coming." Yep, I hear them. They're in the air. Last comment. FF18 buffs. That Georgia Tech series starts in Boulder in 2025 and ends in Atlanta in 2026. Good to know. All right, Rock and Rant. What if anything do you have to say following Week 11? Crazy chaos in college football.
Well, I'm excited to have a bye week personally for Miami, so they can try to get their act together, see if it's a wake up call or if you got what you got, and you just got to hope that Cam Ward and the offense are always on. But let's get to sit back and see whether Kansas causes some chaos or what happens with Georgia and Tennessee. I think I'm leaning towards Tennessee there. I think you're right. I don't think Georgia's making the playoff, which is remarkable. But we'll see. So just looking to see everybody freak out on Tuesday about something that literally blew up in freaking one day yesterday. So let's see what happens with the playoff reveal this Tuesday and see who has the drama hit and see if there's a lot more. It seems to be we're in that zone for more coordinators getting fired. Let's see what happens in the next week or two if any coach actually bites the bullet.
All right. I want to thank Rock for being here tonight. It was good to have him back. Show wasn't the same without him. Glad to have you back. Just a programming note, tomorrow, Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, Big Ten Mafia show with myself, Sergeant Pickles, and Becky Go Huskies. We will be breaking down all the action in the Big Ten in depth from Week 11 and giving you a preview of Week 12. I know a lot of people want to get Wild Utes' thoughts on the Holy War game. Tune in Tuesday at 8 p.m. You can hear him rant and rave then, I am sure. I'm sure he has a lot to say about it. He was at the game, as was Bomber. They both were able to go to the game together and do some tailgating together. I was happy to see that. So tune in Tuesday at 8 p.m. for the Big 12 Mafia show. And then Friday at 8 p.m., the Big Freaking Friday show, where it'll be myself, you, Bomber, who knows who else. Somebody can always drop by. Rock and Rant was on here last Friday, the Friday before. We had Greg Flugar with us. So tune in on Friday. That's our big show of the week, and we'll give some picks. And if you've got a bookie or you've got a sports book on your phone, pick the opposite of whatever I pick, and you should be okay. You just got to figure the 5-team parlay that you got to pick. That's on you.
Just want to say, like, if you pick my picks, you'll be above the 52% threshold. That means you're making money, even though I actually don't do it myself. But
there you go. All right. I appreciate everybody coming in and watching us tonight. It was much appreciated. Thank you to Ryan Willie for the super chat. We will catch you guys next Sunday. Until then, peace out.